Welcome to Firearms Friday from the Wyoming State Museum in Cheyenne. I'm Evan Green. I'm the firearms historian for the museum and have some Sharps carbines to talk to you about today. This carbine, it's an 1863 model, and it was originally a breech-loading percussion carbine. And that meant that when you opened this breech, you would insert into the chamber a cartridge that was bound in either paper or linen and treated to be extremely flammable. So that paper or linen cartridge contained the bullet and the powder charge. Then when you closed this action, you could put a percussion cap on the nipple, or these had what was called the Lawrence patent pellet primer feed system, in that there's a reservoir here on the side of the action where you would insert these priming pellets. Then when you cocked the hammer, it would feed one of those pellets up aligned with the nipple so that when you pulled the trigger, the hammer would crush that priming pellet and ignite the charge in the barrel. And I understand that it worked 100% of the time, about 50% of the time. But fortunately, you could still prime it with a standard percussion cap. Now, there were some problems with these early breech-loading firearms that used the paper and linen cartridges. And that is the difficulty in getting an effective and solid seal behind that cartridge so that the shooter did not get blowback of gases and powder particles and whatever when the firearm was discharged. That was solved by the introduction and use of the self-contained metallic cartridges, because the brass cartridge, and to a somewhat lesser extent the early copper cartridge cases, would expand when the firearm was discharged and create momentarily a very effective seal. So these were, again, a model of 1863. They were very popular on the Union side during the Civil War. And after the Civil War, about 8,000 of them were converted to the caliber 50-70. That meant taking away the percussion nipple, modifying the breech block to a center fire firing pin. And it's interesting, and this will come to bear further on in this discussion, but there was a firm in New York called Schuler, Hartley, and Graham. And in the middle of the 19th century, they were the largest firearms wholesaler and distributor in the United States. And they got these things on both directions, because prior to the Civil War, and in the start of the Civil War, they had agents in Europe buying up firearms, which they brought back to the United States, sold to the Union for use on that side in the Civil War. Then after the war, this firm of Schuler, Hartley, and Graham bought surplus Civil War firearms from the government and turned around and sold them back to Europe. And lots of those firearms, including a reported 8,000 of these Sharps carbines, went to France for the Franco-Prussian War, circa 1870 to 1871. So keep in mind Schuler, Hartley, and Graham, and let's look at another Sharps 1863 carbine. That is the Cadillac version of that particular firearm. And this one was a mystery to me. This is the Sharps 1863 is a fairly common firearm. Why would somebody go to the extent to embellish one that they did with this particular one? It's the same basic gun as the one we just talked about, but it is elaborately engraved. Over half of the barrel is engraved. The barrel band is engraved. The hammer, the trigger, both sides of the lever, the butt plate is engraved. The stock, which I'm convinced is original, has been checkered and carved. So why would somebody do this? And I thought a clue was that there's a name engraved right here. It's engraved L-A Lalatite, L-A-L-A-T-T-E, which is a French name from the Brittany region in France. So I went, is it possible that this firm, Schuler, Hartley, and Graham, had this firearm embellished, and that this Lalanchette guy was a French purchasing agent or someone in French government, somebody that they wanted to impress and grease the skids for a deal with France? But that's totally speculation on my part. But researching a very unique firearm like this one is often like following a trail of crumbs. Sometimes you find a cookie and sometimes you find a dead end. And I think maybe I found a cookie because the Schuler, Hartley, and Graham agent in France during the Franco-Prussian War was a guy named Reynolds. And he had a fairly scary encounter. He went up in a balloon, an observation balloon, with a French officer. The wind changed and took them over the Prussian lines, and they were shot at. So when he came back to the United States, the firm had a Smith & Wesson revolver engraved and inlaid with the guy's name and an engraving of the balloon. And they gave him that revolver as a token of his experience and a token of their appreciation for his work. So is that an explanation for why this particular firearm was so elaborately embellished? I don't know. Again, that's speculation, but it seems to make a certain amount of sense. The fly in the ointment for me is, okay, if that happened, why do we have this firearm now and it's not somewhere in France? The other connection is that the collector, who very generously donated this firearm, among others, to us, bought it while he was living in New York. So who knows? I don't. If you got any thoughts or ideas, put them in the comments below. Thank you for watching.